right. Hey, welcome back. This is Tempest Part 3. There you go. Tempest Part 3. So here's a question for you. As you're reading this play, Act 4, why does Prospero call up these different spirits? Do you notice that? There's Juno and a few other spirits that he calls up. What's the purpose of that? What do you see there that's important, that's necessary? Is this his version of like a light show? Like a fireworks show? Sorry, it's my dog. You want to take a look at her? She's pretty cool looking. There you go. That's Mayfield. Yeah. As soon as I hit record, she got excited. So what's the deal with that? Is it like a fireworks show? What is the deal? In celebration, is it a show he puts on in celebration of this? It's not really a marriage yet between Miranda and Ferdinand, but it is a love that has developed, and he appears to like Ferdinand. He appears to like Miranda's choice, although this is like the third, technically like the second man that she's ever seen besides her dad, right? Because she was just a baby when they were put on board the ship and then sent off from Milan. And so she's seen her dad, and she's seen Caliban. And Caliban's not a fully human creature. So that's kind of interesting, So that was part of his warning and his worry in the beginning was, well, you haven't seen any guys. You haven't seen really any men. And the first one she meets, man, she just like falls head over heels in love with. Well, she has pretty good taste. Obviously, the guy's a good guy. He's a prince. That doesn't hurt. And as you can see, Prospero approves of him as well. So, is the spirit calling up, the calling up of spirits? Is this some form of a celebratory thing he's doing? Why else do you think he would be doing it? What other conclusions? What other conclusions would you come up with? Could you come up with this? That's a good question to be asking. I tend to think that in some ways this is like almost, what's the word for it? It's almost like a show. I think it's a celebration, but I think it's also like an intimidation thing. It kind of reminds me of like, I don't know, goats. When they do a big display and they bump into other goats with their horns and watch this and just kind of a. You should be afraid, kind of a scene. And, I mean, if that's his goal, then it definitely succeeds. Because look at Ferdinand's response. I mean, it's pretty dramatic. Ferdinand is, like, totally impressed. I think I wrote down here, further proof that Prospero is a man of great power and authority. I always picture, like, I have a daughter. She's 9. And I imagine the first time that she goes on a date with a guy. Something in me feels like, I heard a story about a guy, actually. I heard a story that his daughter was going on a first date, and the guy was coming to pick her up, and he met the guy at the door with a shotgun in his hand. Said, hey, I was just cleaning my shotgun. Where are you guys heading tonight? And the guy was like, we're gonna, and then he kind of just talked. He said, "You guys are you're gonna bring my daughter back on time, right? 10 o'clock curfew. That's gonna be okay." He's got a shotgun in his hand. So to me, this kind of reminds me of that. And when I think of my daughter going on a date, I could feel that kind of the desire to intimidate someone who I want to be on their guard and be respectful and so forth. So anyway. But look at Ferdinand's response, and the text is, he says, "Let me live here forever," because he's so impressed with Prospero. Your dad rocks. That's kind of how I interpret it that way. Your dad rocks. Your dad is tough. But then there's a sudden shift in this scene. All of a sudden, Prospero kind of forgets. He loses control for a second, right? And realizes that he is almost assassinated. In a way, this is like a flashback to Milan, where he was so wrapped up in this kind of spirit work that he forgot to rule. He forgot to govern responsibly, And that's kind of what we see here as well. So he does the big fireworks display, the big display of spirits, and they come gallivanting in, and all of a sudden he gets real kind of despondent and kind of real kind of anxious, and then even Ferdinand and Miranda are like, "What's wrong with it? What's wrong with my dad?" Let's take a look at this here. Actually, she says, "I've never seen him so affected." Basically, let's pull it up. Her actual words are, Act 4, Scene 1, she says, "Never till this day saw I him touched with anger so distempered." And then Prospero says, well, let's not get to that yet. So he gets a flashback. He's distempered, I believe, because he got pretty excited about the display of spirits. Iris, Ceres, Juno, and so forth. And he realizes that, as he says here on line 139, "I had forgot that foul conspiracy of the beast Caliban and his confederates against my life. The minute of their plot is almost come. I had forgot." Forgot what? He forgot to rule. He forgot that he was the governing authority. He forgot that he was in charge. He got caught up in this little game of black magic or dark magic that he's doing, and he almost got the same result that he had in Milan. He almost got killed. He almost got basically abducted again. And so I think this is what really shakes him up. All of a sudden he realizes, oh my gosh, I almost made the same mistake I made last time, where I totally forgot what I was supposed to be doing, and I left my brother with too much power, and I got abducted, I got overtaken, I got overthrown, and honestly, I don't think this is necessarily a power trip that he's on. I definitely think he has a lot of power, but I think what we see here is a Prospero who has, in many ways, kind of learned his lesson, and yet makes a mistake, and remembers the mistake he made before, and does not want to go there again. That's what I see here. And thus, he's very moved, he's very worked up. I wrote in my notes here, he was drunk on his own power, and this drunkenness led to his first downfall in Milan, and the endangerment of his own daughter, and perhaps his wife. And so here he is. Now, going back to Milan, we don't know what happened to his wife. We don't know what happened to Miranda's mother. But one of the assumptions is that perhaps by being so caught up in this black magic, that somehow he lost his wife as well, and maybe she was killed or she died or something. And so there's something about the responsibility that strikes him all of a sudden. And then he goes into this interesting passage. I love this section. He says this on line 146. "You do look, my son," this is Prospero to Ferdinand, "you do look, my son, in a moved sort, as if you were dismayed. Be cheerful, sir. Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air, and like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit, shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind." And then there's a shift. So he's talking about the spirit show. I like to call this spirit show, kind of like the light show. And he even says, "Be cheerful, our revels are ended." It was supposed to be a fun thing. This was supposed to be a celebration, right? Be cheerful, buddy. Hey, slaps on the back. Don't worry about it. It's all over now, but, you know. And it was just it was baseless fabric. It was just spirit stuff, not real solid, right? Like Ferdinand didn't know that, but anyway. But then he makes a shift from spirit, kind of spirit essence, to real humans, and he says, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. Sir, I am vexed Bear with my weakness, my old brain is troubled. Be not disturbed with my infirmity, if you be pleased. Retire into my cell, and there repose. A turn or two I'll walk, to still my beating mind. Hold on 1 second. May, on your bed. Hey, get on your bed over there. My dog, she likes to watch this. Check this out here. She likes to lay on that blanket there, which happens to belong to my 9-month-old baby. The dog belongs over there. See her pouting face there? Yeah, lay down. That's her bed over there. It's a little different set. Gotta keep the dog off the baby bed. Alright, so we are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with sleep. Now, there's a lot going on here with this, and Shakespeare loves to, or seems to talk about a lot, this idea of what life is. Talks about life in As You Like It, he says, we are just players on a stage. Life is nothing more than actors on a stage, basically. What is the nature of life? What is the nature of humanity? This is something that Shakespeare likes to tackle in different ways, using different metaphors. Is life empty and chaotic, or is it full of complex meanings? Why does Prospero get a bit serious here? Does it have something to do with Caliban? Does it have something to do with his own past and how he is hoping to control his own desires? Does it have something to do with his humility as a leader, as an authority, knowing he is not perfect and very capable of slipping up again? Is he too dependent upon providence? And that's an interesting question there. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. The other thing about this here, I think that's interesting, is Prospero is a man of great power, right? This is a guy who puts his robe on, he's got his staff, and he can create a tempest. He can create a massive storm at sea. He can control the weather. He can control these spirits. He can do all kinds of crazy stuff. And it's this man who is saying we. Who's we? My dad used to have a statement he used to say when I would say something like, hey, we're pretty scared. And he'd always say, what do you mean we? You got a mouse in your pocket? I thought that was a pretty good one, actually. But here it's interesting because the we pronoun, in a similar way that my dad used to say it, the we includes who? Who does the we include? The we includes whom? The we includes Prospero, because Prospero says it. It includes Ferdinand and Miranda. Now those two can't control the seas. Those two can't control storms at sea. They can't control the weather. They can't control spirits. And yet Prospero lumps himself in with them. Now I think that's an interesting point, worthy of considering. He sees himself as a humble man. He sees himself as a humble man. And this is something that has changed in Prospero. We don't ever see him as a very arrogant man. We see him wielding great power, but we only really see him after his brokenness, after his humility. Back in Milan, I imagine this guy was a real egomaniac. For next week, you're going to read Dr. Faustus, and there's a crazy, flaming egomaniac for sure. That guy's a nut job, and you'll see he's a funny, classic character, but a fool and just a arrogant son of a gun. So you'll see a difference here, I think. I'm hoping you will, because I think right here we see Prospero saying again, we are such stuff as dreams are made on. Our little life. Again, this is a man who has lived a huge life in comparison to other men, and yet he sees it as a little life. he sees himself as little in comparison to providence, and as in comparison to the history of humanity, and in comparison to what God is doing perhaps on this earth, and so forth. So anyway, that's a key point there toward the end here, where we really kind of begin to see Prospero close up, or closer up, I should say. So Act 5, let's move toward Act 5. This is getting a little bit long. Hopefully I'm not totally boring you. Act 5, Scene 1. Now does my project gather to a head, Prospero says. My charms crack not, my spirits obey, and time goes upright with his carriage. How's the day? Ariel responds. On the 6th hour, at which time, my lord, you said our work should cease. Prospero. I did say so, when first I raised the Tempest. Say, my spirit, how fares the king and the followers? Ariel, confined together, in the same fashion as you gave in charge, just as you left them, all prisoners, sir. In the lion grove, which weather fends your cell, they cannot budge till your release. The king, his brother, and yours abide all three distracted, and the remainder mourning over them, brimful of sorrow and dismay, but chiefly him that you termed, sir, the good old Lord Gonzalo. His tears run down his beard like winter's drops from eaves of reeds. Your charm so strongly works them, that if you now beheld them, your affections would become tender. Prospero. Interesting kind of statement by Ariel, right? Ariel is not a human, and says your affections would become tender. This is a very human-like thing, right? And Prospero kind of picks up on that and says, do you think so, spirit? Right? So, stating a difference here. This is a spirit talking. So he says, do you think so, spirit? Because you're a spirit, Ariel. Ariel. Mine would, sir, were I human. Prospero says, and mine shall. His heart will become tender when he sees these men broken. That's Ariel's point and Prospero's point here. Hast thou, which art but air, that's what Ariel is, right? Air. A touch, a feeling of their afflictions, and shall not myself, one of their kind that relish all as sharply, passion as they, be kindlier moved than thou art? Though with their high wrongs I am struck to the quick, yet with my nobler reason against my fury do I take part. He takes part against his fury because he has nobler reason. You know, part of this deal here, as we look at Prospero, Ariel, and Caliban, those kind of our chief characters here with regard to reason and instinct. I suppose we can also throw the other guys, the shipwrecked crew, in there as well, because the shipwrecked crew, Alonso, Sebastian, and the others, those are the ones who originally overthrew Prospero in their wickedness. They did not contain their passions, and their greed got the best of them, and that's why they kicked Prospero out. Now, Prospero took ownership of that, but still, we're talking about men or people who can control their passions. Well, speaking of things who cannot control their passions, this dog of mine, if I put a like a piece of meat there on the floor, it would be really hard to keep her away from that. And the only reason that she wouldn't go after the meat is because she'd know that I would swat her, or I'd put her outside, or I'd scold her, right? I might yell at her. I might say, "No, hey, no." But for my children, I don't yell at my children. I don't kick my dog, but I don't swat my children in the way that I would swat a dog on the butt or on the muzzle. Maybe just kind of tap her or spray her in the face with water, or whatever. I don't do that with my children. Why is that? because children can learn in a different way, right? There's a different type of logical reasoning. In this text, we're talking about nobler reason. What is it? What is nobler reason? This is a thing that humans have. One of the questions we have is, what happens when you have humans that don't have this? What kind of people are those? Are those savages? What about this Caliban? You know, we haven't mentioned before, I didn't mention this before, is Caliban is like the word Caliban. If you write it out, it's the same letters as cannibal in the English or British spelling, the archaic spelling. So Caliban and cannibal. One of the sources for the Tempest comes from travel diaries of a man who landed on the island of Bermuda and sent back stories to England. And so Shakespeare most likely got a hold of these. But in these stories from Bermuda, there was writings about cannibals and these savage tribes who would eat each other and eat people who violated their townships and their land and so forth. And so one of the questions is, so what is it? First of all, what is human? What does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to be a savage? I think there are a few different savages in this text. I think Caliban can be seen as a savage-like creature for his uncontrolled passions, uncontrolled desires. He lives by instinct. Again, going back to my dog here, she's a female, but if a male dog, comes up to her when she's in heat, they're going to make puppies, right? She's never met the dog before. She doesn't have to meet the dog. That's just instinct, right? It's not I don't look at her and say, wow, you need to really tighten up your morals there, sister. I don't scold my dog for that. That's her instinct, right? That's what she needs. She has to do that for survival. But you and I, for humans, that's different, obviously. We control those passions. So who are the characters in the text who lack control of their passions? Who are the characters in the text who lose control? That's the key. And so because one of the things we see here is he says, nobler reason comes against his fury. And he goes on to say, the rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance. The rarer action, the really human action, perhaps, is in virtue rather than in vengeance. So we have Caliban, who lives by instinct, but also Sebastian. We have Alonso, who was one of the ones who overthrew Prospero originally. Stefano, Trinculo, these guys that want to kill Prospero. They don't even know the guy. They want to kill him and take over the island. They're just acting on what? Acting on greed, acting on instinct. What feels good for the moment. This is what an animal acts on. What feels good for me right a second, and I'm going to do it. What makes a human different than an animal? This idea of reason, of logic, of self-control. He continues, they being penitent, the sole drift of my purpose doth extend, not a frown further. So they being penitent. So part of his goal, part of Prospero's goal, he reveals here. He's looking for these guys to show some brokenness for what they've done. Did they recognize what they ruined my life? Did they recognize that they were criminal in their capture of me and of sending me onto the ocean without any food or water or a sail on the ship just to die? I mean, they're murderers. These guys are murderers. Do they realize what they've done? And through their time on the island, through Prospero's manipulation of the spirits and of the waves and the weather, these men have become broken. And really that becomes revealed here that that's what Prospero was driving at the whole time. They being penitent, the sole drift of my purpose doth extend not a frown further. Go release them, Ariel. My charms I'll break, their senses I'll restore, and they shall be themselves. Why themselves? That's a great line. They shall be themselves because they shall be humble. They shall recognize the truth about what they've done. Because perhaps it's when we see ourselves, when we become humble, When we see ourselves clearly, that's when we become truly ourselves. Not when we're lost in pride, not when we're all caught up in our arrogance. This is not who we really are. We're living a fake life at that point, or at least believing false things about ourselves. At least that's what Prospero seems to be saying, right? So, what does Prospero claim was his purpose? I just told you right there. These guys being broken. These guys being penitent. How does the play end? How does Shakespeare wrap up this conflict? Why is this play called a comedy? These are questions that you need to answer as you finish this text. How does it wrap up? What is important about the way it wraps up? What does Prospero do? What is his final choice? What is his final decision? Obviously, he'll have the choice to either go back to Milan or stay on the island where he rules. What does he do? This is an important thing for you to study and find out, to look closely at. What will he do with his magic? What will he do with his power? Now, he's ruled pretty effectively on the island. Will he take that same power back to Milan? Should he? Or should he leave the robe and the staff, or drop it into the ocean? Because you wouldn't leave it with Caliban, because Caliban would probably not do the best things with all that power. So what should Prospero do? What does he do, and what should he do? All right? Please feel free to send me questions, and don't forget to take the quiz. All right? Talk to you later.